Hello, my name's Angie from Angie Holden Makes, and I'm with Cori with Hey Let's Make Stuff, and we're at Heat Transfer Warehouse this week, and we are going to talk today about sublimation tumblers, tips and tricks for getting the best results. Particularly, we're going to use these 20-ounce straight guys. They're the easiest if you're just starting out with tumblers, but a lot of these tips might apply to other tumblers as well. So first of all, 20-ounce skinny tumbler should be sublimation ready because we are making sublimation tumblers. So you're going to need a sublimation tumbler and then we're going to need a sublimation print. So it should be sublimation ink printed on sublimation paper on a sublimation printer. And that's the two most critical things to make this work. And then I always clean mine with a lint roller.
I usually actually use alcohol and a microfiber cloth. I find that sometimes, I don't know, oily fingerprints can mess up a thing, but if I don't, I use a lint roller.
Yeah, so cleaner the better to get the best results, I guess. So we're just gonna clean this. And then the next thing we're gonna talk about is when you print your sublimation print, it's probably gonna look something like this. Might be on a smaller piece of paper, but it probably has a large white area around it. So you will wanna trim this. Minimum, I like 2 edges that are totally straight and right up against where my sublimation ink are. So a top edge and one side. You can do this a couple different ways. You can use scissors and very, very carefully trim the 2 sides. The other 2 sides can have a little bit of white, and we'll talk about how to make that work. So scissors, paper trimmer if you have one large enough. I like a paper trimmer that has a rotary blade in it, a little bit easier to work with. I feel like it doesn't drag through the paper as much.
Yeah, and I really like a rotary, like an actual rotary cutter, like you might use for cutting fabric, for sewing, with an acrylic ruler and a self-healing cutting mat, because I can find I can chop off like the tiniest amounts that I might need. It just works really well for me.
So we're gonna go ahead and sublimate one using sort of our first technique, and I'm just gonna pick one. So I'm gonna pick
got a few here.
The mom tumbler here. So the first technique would be to turn this upside down. So this is the opening. Turn it upside down on the table, and now you have a flat surface. And so I mentioned that 2 sides should be cut. So your first cut side should be your longer side, goes also against the table. So now I have flat surface all around, and I can just wrap this. But I want to minimize the seam. So if you have any overlap once you wrap this around, so I'm gonna do this again. If there's any overlap of your paper, your seam can get a little wonky. So, tip to combat that, this edge that we cut straight and right up against the sublimation print, we're gonna put tape on the back. So back side, and I'm gonna put heat resistant tape, a very long piece, and we're going to put it right up against that straight edge. We're gonna cut it again, so you don't have to get it perfect, but as close as you can get it to the edge. And there's lots of static electricity in here. All right, so closest to the edge as I could get it. And I have tape on the back. First I can trim these ends. And then I take much time, but I'll try to go a little bit quicker. You wanna trim just the edge off of here to make sure there's no tape. And I usually do like... No paper, sorry. And I just do like a hair.
Yeah, I mean, she's cutting off the tiniest amount here.
Yeah, so just a very hair all the way down. And that way I know that it's just tape there, I guess. So no excess paper, no excess tape, everything meets up exactly.
See if I can, here's the size, the size of paper she's cutting off. It's a very, very tiny pieces here, even tinier than this. This is a large piece.
It's like a hair.
Yeah.
You can also use the same method we talked about. So I can use scissors for this. I can use a paper trimmer. Again, a paper trimmer with a rotary blade does better when you're talking about these super fine cuts, or the method Cori mentioned definitely works as well. All right, so there's one tip. All right, so now, flat edge against flat edge, and you wrap it around and the tape goes on the bottom and any overlap over the top. So if you've ever had ghosted seams that were darker than any place else, that's the tape under there is going to prevent that. So this part goes over the top. And now we want this tight. So small pieces of heat resistant tape, 2-3 inches. Put it on the top and pull as tight as possible. And it helps, like this green tape, it has a little stretch to it. So I'm stretching it, pulling it, putting it down. And now I want to check and make sure, like, does it look straight before I continue? And then that repeats all the way down, and I overlap a little bit.
It's a lot of tape, but the second you have any kind of gaps or bubbles or puckering or anything, this is very sharp. Anytime you have any sort of gaps or anything, when that sublimation ink becomes a gas, because you'll hit it with this high heat of the heat press, the sublimation ink on the paper is actually turned into a gas, and that means that it can go just about anywhere, so it's going to try and escape. And you really want it to go directly into your tumbler, so instead of having it gas out or blow out, or there's lots of little terms for where the gas might go other than where you want it to go, the more pieces of tape, the fewer gaps you have, the more all of that ink is going to go into the actual tumbler and not into the air around.
And the way I look at it as the tape is cheaper than sublimation blanks. Sublimation blanks are expensive, and I do not want to ruin a tumbler, so I say all the tape.
Yeah.
You can definitely try it without all this tape. If it works for you, that's great, but this is definitely what works for me.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go all the way down, and then
I will
do you
usually
have a scraper.
Yeah, there's one over here. I will usually use a little bit fewer pieces of tape down, but then I will also put a strip all the way down the seam, straight down. So, I mean, I think either way.
Both ways.
Depending on whatever works for you. But really, you're just trying to minimize any gaps or anything, because that's how you get the kind of ugly edges and where it's just blurry or...
And I just pre-cut these strips and I stuck them to the edge of the table. One tip.
Amazing.
Goes a little bit quicker that way. All right, so now I'm about to the end. So now I want the seam perfect and burnish.
Yeah, so she's basically running the edge of that scraper along the seam, again, to get that tape even tighter against the tumbler. Another way to keep it from gassing out. Is gassing out the right term? Blowing out? Gassing out?
Both. And I'm gonna let you wanna do the top and the bottom? So
sure.
Tape and do your method?
Yeah, so there's two ways that you can kind of do this, and if we make a second one, we can go ahead and show the other way. So the second way that you would wanna do this is to trim this lower, trim this so that you basically have a flat or straight edge, but you'll see the white around the bottom, right? You'll see like a strip of white around the bottom, and we'll do that here. But my method here is that I like to roll this along the table. So actually I'm gonna tape it.
You want some tape?
Yeah, I need to tape it first. So just before I roll it on the table, we're gonna tape it.
Do you want small pieces or big pieces? I'll cut pieces for you.
Yeah, I think we can do small pieces.
Small pieces?
So you can use a long piece or a small piece, but basically I'm gonna use my thumbs to press the edge of this transfer into it's really important on the bottom, into the bottom taper, like roundness of this tumbler, and then tape. So I'm gonna go ahead and just press everything with my thumbs to get it started, and then we can tape. You can also use one big strip all the way around. But again, we're trying to get this as flat against the tumbler as we can. So here we go.
And I feel like at this point, if I'm seeing gaps in the paper, like maybe I messed up and I didn't get it tight enough, a lot of times I just peel it off and start over.
Yeah.
Because I'm not gonna ruin the tumbler.
You can also, if you want, cut slits into this so that it lays a little bit flatter. I'm not gonna do that this time, but it is an option. So now I'm basically going to work my way all the way around, pressing this in to the edge of this tumbler with all of these beautiful pieces of tape that Angie is making for me.
Such a good job.
I'm telling you. What did we say in our last video? Crafting's better with friends?
Yes.
Crafting is better when you have Angie as your assistant. So you can see here that I'm really pressing into that bottom edge. And anywhere you see where it might, because it's going to buckle or, I can't think of the right word, fold a little bit, you just want to press that in. You're going to see that it's not going to be necessarily 100% perfect, but the flatter you get it, the better. Really use your thumbs. And again, like Angie said, like, tape is cheaper than a blank, so let's go ahead and use more tape and try and make the blank as good as we can get it. pucker. I think pucker's the word I was looking for, like in
That's
fabric.
a better word.
And there's some people who do not tape the top and bottom at all. Our friend,
And I can't do that.
Our friend Courtney Brickner from the Crafty Brick, she doesn't tape the top or bottom. She's amazing. She's got some sort of
Mine does not turn out at all.
Mine never turns out, yeah. Hers
So
always.
if you have trouble with ghosting at the top and the bottom, you might try this method. If you don't have trouble, save the tape, save the time.
Yeah. And I actually don't do this on the top. Do you do it on the top?
I usually add a little bit, but I mean, we can try it.
Okay, we'll try it without.
Yeah.
I feel like the top is just a little bit easier because it does not curve quite nearly as much as the bottom.
Yeah,
does.
it's straight, whereas that is very
curved.
not straight.
You can see here, getting all the way around. Are my hands getting tired? Yes, they are. And I am. I like this green tape. The stretchiness
I do like
of
it.
I have some of my green tape. I feel like it's an awesome option.
For heat tape, the stretchier the better when it comes to tumblers for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. See, I'm just really like where I see, you know, a little bit of puckering, I'm like, get in there. And at the end, I'm going to probably have the most puckering just because of the way that the rest of the paper is. So what I did was I worked my way around because I know that the seam is going to be here. So if I am going to have an ever so slight, you know, imperfection, I kind of want it to be near the seam because that's just seems, it's like the back of the tumbler, even though a tumbler is round. Now you'd think that might be good enough, but one thing I like to do as well is I like to roll the end of this on a table. So I apologize to Heat Transfer Warehouse for maybe making dents in their table. I often do this on a self-healing cutting mat, but you basically are, again, pushing that transfer into the bottom of the tumbler. I just think it works really well, even better than your thumbs can kind of get. What do you think?
Yeah, and I even sometimes do it like this.
just get in there.
Just to make sure everything's
flat, right?
down. Yeah.
See, anytime you kind of like feel with your thumbs and you're like, oh, that's a little bit, you can press it in there.
Yeah.
Now you can do the same exact thing with the top, but I don't seem to have nearly as much problem with the top. You can just like roll it a little bit if you want, but I think doing enough of these now that I don't really tend to have an issue with the top. So
Yeah, I say
we've got tape.
Do you want to use some paper?
Yeah.
So when Cori was talking about the ink can blow out, I don't know, I'm just a safety girl. I wrap it in paper so the ink doesn't get all over the press.
Yep. This doesn't need nearly as much tape.
No, a couple pieces.
Oh man, I'm getting myself some green tape. I'll have to get the name of this tape from Brooke.
And then
All right.
heat press.
What little press are we using today? Little wallet tumbler press.
wallet
press. All right, so we're going to press it for...
I have it set 400 degrees, 60 seconds, and then I figure we'd flip it and do it 60 more.
Okay, let's give that a shot. Here we go.
And I didn't test the pressure, so fingers crossed.
There we go. So I always do it with the seam at the top because that just gives me a visual on how much I need to flip it. So we're gonna go ahead and count down a minute here.
So while she's doing that, if you don't want to tape like the bottom completely, we're going to show a different kind of technique. So these are printed out exactly the right size. So they're to a template, they're exactly the right size for the 20-ounce skinny tumbler. However, I cut the top and one side. I could cut some off the bottom. And that would basically lift it up off of this rounded kind of curved bottom. Just a little bit. Like I like a little, like just the finest line of white.
Little fine line of white. It works better too. I feel like if you have like a really dark black image, that line of white gets kind of obvious. But if you have an image like this one over here,
Well, I feel like these
it should be
peaches.
fine, yeah.
So we're gonna try it with the peaches, and well, let's clean it. I'm gonna follow all the rules I used before.
Yeah, so you should open it because when you rotate it around, you press the green button, that starts the timer.
Oh. Okay. So I generally kind of hold it up. Is this how you do it?
do you want to do your tape
Kind of
method?
look where
Oh, yes. Where to cut it.
Where to cut it, yeah.
Trim it.
that's what I do. So I'm just gonna kind of use a piece of tape, I think, and mark
That's a good idea.
where to cut it. So I think about right there would leave me a little bit of a white at the bottom. And then I'm gonna use this paper trimmer just for a little something different. Line it up and trim it off. So that means that it's going to be kind of perfectly on my tumbler.
So she wants to have it aligned with the top of the tumbler, and then you'll have that little bit of white at the bottom.
Yeah.
But a lot of times if you're just really struggling to get that really nice bottom, it's better to have like a little bit of a white piece than it is to have, you know, kind of an ugly bottom. Nobody wants an ugly bottom.
Absolutely no one.
No. No ugly bottoms here.
Quote of the day. We could put that on the next tumbler.
That is toasty.
Also, when we burn your table. Okay.
Cori and Angie never get invited back to heat transfer warehouse.
Ruined the table.
I put it on the craft paper.
Okay. I'm gonna use the same tips and tricks for the seam. I don't know.
I think so.
I use the seams I
haven't done the seams this way, and I feel like this is now my new way of doing seams. I'm never going to do them the way I did them before. We're not going to teach you about them. I'm going to go edit my post about taping tumblers to include Angie's method. And I'm going to put, this is Angie's method, and I stole it.
I do like this method.
I think a lot of times we get impatient when we want to make projects, but if you want a perfect project, or as close to perfect as you can get, it does take time. It just takes more effort to make a better product.
Yeah. And we're using, speaking of that, we're using a tumbler press today.
We are.
I prefer that for patience to an oven, and some people are different, but the oven, I get impatient with the shrink wrap.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be honest.
So you can see here, instead of this wrapping up and over, it now is still on the flat. There's no part of it that goes onto the rounded side.
Yeah.
So you will have this white edge at the bottom, but at least it will be straight.
So now,
yeah, I'm never using the other method. The other method is out the window. Only Angie's method. So if for some reason
I can get this straight.
your transfer was bigger and it went over the other side of the tape, you'd want to trim down the transfer so that the end ends up on the tape, because that tape there is basically keeping it from bleeding through the other side of the paper. So sometimes that will end up with like a dark seam or something like that, where it's just not cute.
it doesn't appear I cut this very straight. Hold on.
That's why I need the rotary cutter. It's just so much easier.
Let's see.
Oh yeah. Just trim it.
I'm gonna fake it a little bit here.
Now, are you the person who unwraps this when it's really hot, or do you usually let it cool?
I am like, break out the heat resistant gloves and ripping it off. I am so impatient, and you're like, let it cool completely.
I'm always afraid that if I do it when it's too hot, it's gonna like go, like, you know, create like a ghosted image or resublimate.
I gotta see it. I have to see it. I gotta see it right away.
Did it turn out okay?
Yes, I have to see it immediately. Yeah. I even use a weeding hook to pick at the tape and get it off because I don't want to burn my hands. So.
I mean, I have done it, but usually I'm like, I'm gonna go get a snack.
No, and then
the perfect opportunity for a snack.
There are people that like dip them in water and like do all this stuff to pull them off, and
I am water method.
I am hot all the way.
Put that on a shirt. And just hot all the way.
Another tumbler.
That could be the theme for our Angie and Cori show, hot all the way.
There you go.
And Cori eats snacks instead.
Okay. All right, now burnish this one. You can also use your fingernail for this part. I tend to not use my fingernails, But yeah, if you don't have a scraper, I mean, old gift card would even work for this though.
I bet this method would work on that hydro sublimation paper as well.
Yeah.
I had a really difficult time with the overlap on those.
Yes.
And I think that this method would work really well on that. And
Okay, so are we gonna tape the top and the bottom at all, or are we just gonna roll the dice?
I think we're just gonna roll the dice.
Okay, so much less taping with this one. And I'm gonna work on that because you wanna let it cool
Oh,
off.
I was gonna do this.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
You.
You unwrap.
All right, how hot are we? I'm just afraid.
She wants to let it cool longer.
It's still hot. It's not too bad. Where's that weeding hook? Really what I need to be doing is having my other hand in the glove and using my right hand to do the actual work.
A few more pieces.
Yeah, there's a couple more pieces here if you need them.
And you can actually, so she just peeled that piece off
Yep.
of the tumbler, and I can reuse it on this one. If it's still sticky and has no ink on it, reuse.
Gotta use it. And we wrapped these in craft paper, but you can use butcher paper.
There's like a sublimation protective paper. I don't know.
Yeah. I like butcher paper in the sheets, and you like butcher paper in the rolls.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time.
Yeah. And you can reuse this as well. Like there actually is some ink on this, so I'm glad I wrapped it.
Oh yeah.
Because you can see where it says mom. So I'm gonna throw that out because my next mug would say,
Would have a ghosted
Would say mom.
Ooh, this looks good. I'm just tearing through this thing like a maniac now.
see? Impatience, I have to see it.
Oh my gosh. This is the part I always edit out in my video. I'm like, oh, and it's unwrapped.
Magically, all that tape disappeared.
The time doesn't start unless it's at temperature. So now, like, it just got to 400.
Okay, well, I'll give it a couple more seconds. I'll rotate it.
All right. I think because I had it in there a little extra time, not realizing how the press worked, it got a little overblown or a little overcooked. But
It doesn't look bad.
yeah, it doesn't look bad. It's just a little brown in the middle. But yeah, overall, it looks nice.
Not bad. The bottom even looks good, right?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the bottom looks really good. So you can see that it kind of goes onto the bottom versus having all these like kind of ugly ghosting places. Cute. Somebody's getting a tumbler for Mother's Day.
What?
You have to press it again.
Oh.
It's weird.
Put our little straw in there.
Okay. All right, one more. I'm gonna.
Oh, you really are. She's just
Oh
going
no, I
for
just
it.
go for
Wow.
it.
There's no stopping Angie here.
So I think the tape comes off better
I
when
think
it's
you're
hot.
right. You're just like,
It just, like, if it's steaming hot and I can handle it, it's coming off. Because I just think the tape comes off better. I don't know.
I swear a weeding hook is so handy for so many things beyond weeding.
Everyone needs a weeding hook.
I have like 9. So many weeding hooks. But of course, when I need a weeding hook, can I find one?
No.
No.
That's why you have 9.
That's why I have 9.
And I also have to peel it back all at once so I can see the gorgeousness. Just
Not
as a
me,
surprise.
where I'm like tearing through it. The final reveal.
But yeah, I mean, this tape would be fine. I could just peel it off.
I'm definitely getting some of this green tape.
Get a little sneak peek, and it's good.
I guess we should say we also used a sawgrass printer for this, so the colors are
Yes.
super accurate and beautiful.
Amazing colors. So now I'll peel this
You
one
do really
back.
have a final reveal. Ooh. Nice.
So I think you can tell the difference between the two methods, and the white at the bottom works better with some designs, or if you just want to keep it simple and pretty clean, then you'll leave the white at the
Yeah.
bottom. Now, you do have to let it cool before you put this lid back on, so you don't want to melt your seal. But
Oh, this one, the edge up at the top didn't do quite as,
yeah, it did ghost
Perfectly.
a little bit,
just a little bit.
but the seam looks really good.
Yeah,
So good looking seam.
good looking seam.
Yeah.
It's funny because we did the top the same way.
Yeah, so
You never know.
never know.
Pull it out of there and you're like, yeah, I I did exactly the same. Why is it different?
So if the top bothers you, generally doesn't bother me, but anyway, if it bothers you, you can tape the top similar to the way we taped the bottom on the mom version. Just more tape, more time, but you can definitely do that as well.
Yeah, I
feel
wouldn't
like.
necessarily leave the white space at the top. I feel like that's really obvious. I'm not a
I
big
tend to
fan.
not do this white space at the top. I tend to run it all the way to the top every single time.
Yeah, and you can do the rolling as well on the table on the top.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I think those are our Tumbler tips.
Okay, so
Thanks for joining us.
yes, and happy sublimating.